My boyfriend of 3 years proposed with a beautiful vintage ring that looked exactly like my grandmother's heirloom that had gone missing 6 months earlier. When I confronted him, he swore he'd bought it from an antique shop. Then I noticed the tiny engraving on the inside that only my family knew about. Some betrayals are so twisted that they would be unbelievable if they happened in a movie. Unfortunately, real life doesn't follow the rules of good storytelling, which is how I ended up being proposed to with my own stolen family heirloom by the man who had been gaslighting me about its disappearance for months. My name is Emma Rodriguez. I'm 27, and this is the story of how my boyfriend's romantic proposal became the most devastating revelation of my life. I met Jake Morrison 3 years ago at a coffee shop near my apartment in Denver. He was charming, funny, and had the kind of easy confidence that made conversation feel effortless. We started dating casually, but within 6 months, we were spending every weekend together and talking about moving in together. Jake worked in sales for a tech company and seemed to be doing well financially. He had a nice apartment, drove a decent car, and never seemed stressed about money. He was generous with dates and gifts, and he often talked about our future together in ways that made me feel secure about our relationship. I worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm and lived modestly but comfortably. I wasn't wealthy, but I had managed to save some money and owned a few valuable possessions that I treasured for sentimental rather than financial reasons. The most precious of these was my grandmother's engagement ring. Grandma Elena had given me the ring when I turned 21, along with the story of how my grandfather had saved for months to buy for her in 1952. It was a beautiful vintage piece with a small but perfectly cut diamond surrounded by intricate white gold filigree work. This ring represents love that lasts a lifetime. Grandma Elena had told me when she placed it in my hands. Your grandfather worked double shifts for 6 months to afford it, and I wore it for 53 years until the day he died. The ring wasn't worth a fortune, maybe 30 to 40 based on appraisals I'd seen, but it was priceless to me as a family heirloom and a symbol of my grandparents' enduring love. I kept the ring in a small jewelry box on my dresser and would occasionally wear it on special occasions or when I wanted to feel connected to my grandmother's memory. Jake knew about the ring and its significance. I'd shown it to him early in our relationship and told him the story about my grandparents' love and sacrifice. "That's beautiful," he'd said when I showed him the ring. "Your grandmother sounds like an amazing woman." She was. I hope someday I'll have a love story like hers. "You will," Jake had promised, holding my hand. "We will." I trusted Jake completely. He had keys to my apartment, knew where I kept important documents and valuables, and had access to every aspect of my personal life. He would stay at my place several nights a week, and I never had any reason to question his honesty or integrity. That trust was shattered 6 months ago when my grandmother's ring disappeared. I first noticed it was missing on a Tuesday morning in March when I was getting ready for work. I had planned to wear the ring to a company presentation where I was hoping to impress some potential new clients. When I opened my jewelry box, the ring wasn't in its usual spot. I searched my entire bedroom, thinking maybe I had left it on my nightstand or in a different jewelry box. When I couldn't find it, I expanded my search to the entire apartment. "Jake, have you seen my grandmother's ring?" I asked when he came over that evening. "No." "Why?" "I can't find it anywhere. I've looked through my entire apartment." Jake helped me search, looking in places I had already checked multiple times. We moved furniture, searched through laundry, and even looked in kitchen drawers in case I had somehow absent-mindedly placed it there. "When did you last remember seeing it?" Jake asked. "About 2 weeks ago. I wore it to my cousin's wedding reception." "Could you have lost it at the reception?" "I don't think so. I specifically remember taking it off when I got home that night and putting it back in my jewelry box." Jake was sympathetic and supportive during the search. He suggested that maybe I had placed it somewhere else for safekeeping and forgotten, or that it might have fallen behind my dresser. "Don't panic yet," he told me. "These things usually turn up when you least expect them." But the ring didn't turn up. After a week of searching, I filed a police report and contacted my renter's insurance company to see if the theft would be covered. The police were not optimistic about recovering the ring. Unfortunately, jewelry theft is common, and these items usually get sold quickly to pawn shops or private buyers. the officer explained. Without serial numbers or unique identifying marks, it's very difficult to track stolen jewelry. I was devastated. The ring wasn't just valuable, it was irreplaceable. It connected me to my grandmother's memory and represented generations of family history. I can't believe someone would steal from me, I told Jake through tears. Who would do something like that? I don't know, babe. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Jake was incredibly supportive during this period. He listened to me cry about the loss, helped me deal with insurance paperwork, and frequently reminded me that the important thing was the memories I had of my grandmother, not the physical ring. Your grandmother's love for you isn't contained in a piece of jewelry, he would say when I was feeling particularly sad about the loss. She lives on in your heart and your memories. His comfort and perspective helped me gradually accept the loss and move forward. Over the following months, I occasionally mentioned the ring when something reminded me of it. But Jake was always quick to redirect the conversation to more positive topics. You need to stop dwelling on what's gone and focus on what you have, he would say. We have each other, we're building a future together, and that's what matters. I appreciated his optimism and tried to follow his advice about moving forward. What I didn't know was that Jake had been planning a proposal and had apparently decided that my grief over the lost ring presented the perfect opportunity to create a romantic surprise. The proposal happened on a Saturday evening in September, exactly 6 months after the ring disappeared. Jake had planned what seemed like a spontaneous romantic evening. He suggested we take a walk through the park, where we'd had our first official date, followed by dinner at the restaurant where we'd celebrated our 1-year anniversary. I just want to spend a perfect evening with my favorite person, he said when he suggested the plan. The walk through the park was lovely. Jake was unusually sentimental, pointing out places where we'd shared special moments and talking about how much our relationship meant to him. Emma, these 3 years with you have been the best of my life, he said, as we sat on the bench where we'd first kissed. You make me want to be a better person. I feel the same way, I replied, touched by his romantic mood. I love how kind you are, how creative you are, and how you see the best in everyone, he continued. I love that you value family and tradition, and the kind of lasting love your grandparents had. At dinner, Jake was even more sentimental. He ordered a bottle of wine and kept talking about our future together. I want to build the kind of relationship your grandparents had, he said, the kind of love that lasts a lifetime. That would be amazing, I said, starting to suspect that this might be leading to a proposal. After dinner, Jake suggested we walk to the nearby botanical garden where they had evening lights displays. There's something I want to show you, he said as we walked among the illuminated flower beds. He led me to a secluded area with a small gazebo, surrounded by twinkling lights. As we approached, I could see he was getting nervous. Emma, he said, taking my hands, I've been thinking about this moment for months. My heart started racing as he got down on one knee. Emma Rodriguez, you are the love of my life and my best friend. I want to spend forever making you as happy as you make me. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a ring. It was my grandmother's ring. For a moment, I was too shocked to process what I was seeing. The ring looked exactly like the family heirloom that had been stolen from my apartment 6 months earlier. Will you marry me? Jake asked, holding up the ring with a nervous smile. I stared at the ring, my mind racing. It had the same vintage setting, the same small diamond, the same intricate filigree work. It even seemed to be the same size. Jake, I said slowly, this ring looks exactly like my grandmother's ring. I know, he said, still on one knee. When you told me the story about your grandparents' love, I knew I wanted to find something similar for our engagement. I've been searching antique shops for months to find a vintage ring that would honor that tradition. This explanation made sense, and I wanted to believe it. Vintage rings from that era often had similar styling, and it was possible that Jake had found something remarkably similar to my grandmother's ring. It's beautiful, I said, still staring at the ring. So, is that a yes? Jake asked hopefully. I was torn between the joy of being proposed to by the man I loved and the unsettling feeling that this ring was too similar to my grandmother's to be a coincidence. Yes, I said finally, deciding to trust Jake and focus on the happiness of the moment. Jake slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly. He stood up and kissed me, and for a moment I was caught up in the romance and excitement of being newly engaged. "I love you so much," Jake said, holding me close. "I can't wait to spend our lives together." "I love you too," I replied, though part of my mind was still focused on the remarkable similarity between this ring and my grandmother's. That night, we celebrated our engagement with champagne and calls to family and friends. Everyone was excited and happy for us, and I tried to focus on their joy and support rather than my nagging concerns about the ring. But when I looked at the ring more closely the next morning, my concerns intensified. The ring wasn't just similar to my grandmother's sit, it was identical in every detail. The setting, the diamond cut, the filigree pattern, even small imperfections in the metalwork were exactly the same. More importantly, when I looked inside the band, I could see a tiny engraving that made my blood run cold. ERM R1952. Elena Rodriguez and Miguel Rodriguez. My grandparents' initials and wedding year. This wasn't a ring that looked like my grandmother's ring. This was my grandmother's ring. I confronted Jake that afternoon when he came over to discuss wedding plans. "Jake, I need to ask you something about this ring," I said, showing him the engraving inside the band. Jake looked at the engraving and his face went pale. "What about it? These are my grandparents' initials. This isn't a ring that looks like my grandmother's ring. This is my grandmother's ring." "That's impossible. I bought this ring from an antique dealer." "Jake, look at the engraving. ER and MR, 1952. Elena and Miguel Rodriguez. How do you explain that?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, clearly trying to think of an explanation. Maybe the antique dealer acquired your grandmother's ring somehow. Maybe whoever stole it sold it to the shop where I bought this one." This explanation was theoretically possible, but it seemed incredibly unlikely. "Jake, what are the chances that you would randomly find my stolen ring at an antique shop months later?" "I don't know, but that must be what happened." "Which antique shop did you buy it from?" I don't remember the name. It was a small place on the other side of town." "Do you have a receipt?" "I paid cash." Every answer Jake gave made the situation seem more suspicious. He couldn't provide any documentation of the purchase, couldn't remember details about the shop, and seemed increasingly nervous about my questions. "Jake, I think you need to tell me the truth about how you got this ring." "I am telling you the truth. I bought it from an antique dealer." "Then let's go to the shop together. If you bought it legitimately, they should have records of the transaction." "Emma, why are you being so paranoid about this? I found a beautiful vintage ring that honors your family tradition, and instead of being grateful, you're accusing me of..." "What exactly?" Jake was turning the conversation around to make me feel guilty for questioning his story. But I wasn't going to be manipulated. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking for proof that you bought this ring legally. I don't have to prove anything to you. This ring represents our love and our future together. Why are you trying to destroy that?" The more defensive Jake became, the more certain I was that he was lying. That evening, I decided to investigate on my own. I took the ring to 3 different antique jewelry dealers in the area and asked if they had sold a ring matching this description to anyone in the past few months. None of them had any record of selling anything similar. I also visited several pawn shops, thinking that if Jake had somehow acquired the ring through legitimate channels, there might be records of its sale. At the 4th pawn shop I visited, I got the information I was looking for. "Yeah, I remember this ring," said the shop owner when I showed him a photo. "Guy brought it in about 4 months ago. Said it belonged to his girlfriend, but she didn't want it anymore." "Do you remember what the guy looked like?" "Tall, brown hair, maybe late 20s. He seemed nervous, like he wanted to get rid of it quickly." The description matched Jake perfectly. "Do you have any paperwork from the transaction?" "I should have a record." "Let me check." The shop owner pulled out a logbook and found the entry from 4 months earlier. "Here it is. Sold a vintage diamond ring on May 15th to a Jake Morrison for $400. My heart sank. Jake had pawned my grandmother's ring for 404 months ago, then bought it back recently to use for our engagement. I asked for a copy of the transaction record, which included Jake's signature and driver's license information. Armed with this evidence, I went home to confront Jake one final time. "Jake, I know what you did," I said when he arrived that evening. "What are you talking about?" I showed him the pawn shop records. "You stole my grandmother's ring 6 months ago, pawned it for 400, then bought it back to propose to me with my own ring." Jake stared at the paperwork, realizing he had been caught. "Emma, I can explain." "Explain what? That you stole from me? That you lied to me for months while I cried about losing my grandmother's ring? That you let me file police reports and insurance claims for something you had stolen?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Jake?" Jake sat down heavily, finally ready to tell the truth. "I was having financial problems. I had some credit card debt, and I was behind on my car payments. I needed money quickly." "So you stole my ring?" "I borrowed it. I was planning to get it back before you noticed it was gone." "You borrowed it? Without asking? For 4 months?" "I pawned it, thinking I could pay off my debts and buy it back within a few weeks. But then my financial situation got worse, and I couldn't afford to get it back right away." "So you let me think it was stolen?" "I didn't know what else to do. I was embarrassed about my money problems, and I didn't want you to know I had taken the ring. And then you decided to buy it back and propose with it? I thought it would be romantic. I thought you'd be happy to have your grandmother's ring back, and it would be like a fairy tale ending." I stared at Jake in disbelief. He had somehow convinced himself that stealing my ring, lying about it for months, and then proposing with my own stolen property was romantic rather than deeply disturbing. "Jake, you stole from me. You watched me cry about losing my grandmother's ring, knowing that you had taken it. You let me file false police reports. You gaslit me for months about something you had done. I know it looks bad, but I love you. Everything I did was because I wanted to marry you. Everything you did was selfish and dishonest. You put your financial problems and your desire for a romantic proposal ahead of my feelings and my trust. Emma, please, we can work through this. I'll pay you back for the pain I caused. We can start fresh." "Start fresh?" "Jake, you've been lying to me for months about something that meant everything to me. How am I supposed to trust you about anything ever again?" "People make mistakes. I made a mistake, but that doesn't mean our whole relationship is worthless. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate choice to steal from me, followed by months of deliberate choices to lie to me about it. I took off the ring and handed it back to him. I can't marry someone who would do this to me. Emma, please don't throw away 3 years because of one bad decision." "It wasn't one bad decision, Jake. It was hundreds of decisions over 6 months to prioritize yourself over me and our relationship." Jake begged me to reconsider, promised to get counseling, offered to pay for therapy for both of us, and swore that he would never lie to me again. But the damage was too extensive to repair. He had stolen something precious from me, watched me grieve its loss, gaslit me about the theft, and then tried to use my own stolen property to manipulate me into marriage. Even worse, he had done all of this while presenting himself as loving and supportive, offering comfort for pain that he had deliberately caused. I realized that I had never really known Jake at all. The man I thought I loved was capable of systematic deception, theft, and emotional manipulation while maintaining a facade of love and support. "You need to leave," I told him. "I never want to see you again. Emma, please, leave now." Jake finally left, taking my grandmother's ring with him since I couldn't bear to touch something that had been tainted by his betrayal. The next day, I contacted the police to report that I had discovered who had stolen my ring and to provide them with evidence of Jake's confession and the pawn shop records. "This is actually helpful for our investigation," the officer told me. "We've been tracking a pattern of thefts involving people with access to victims' homes. Your boyfriend's method fits a profile we've been building." The police investigation revealed that Jake had been stealing from other girlfriends as well. He had a pattern of building trust with women, gaining access to their homes and valuables, then pawning their possessions when he needed money. He's been doing this for years, Detective Williams explained when she updated me on the case. "We've identified at least 4 other victims who had jewelry and small valuables stolen by boyfriends, matching your ex's description." Jake was arrested and charged with multiple counts of theft and fraud. He eventually pled guilty and was sentenced to 18 months in prison plus restitution to all of his victims. The criminal case allowed me to recover my grandmother's ring, though it took several months of legal proceedings to get it back. When I finally held the ring again, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I was grateful to have the family heirloom back, but it no longer felt the same. Jake's theft and deception had changed my relationship with the ring and what it represented. "It's still your grandmother's ring," my mother told me when I explained how complicated my feelings were about the recovered jewelry. "It still carries all the love and history it always had." Jake's actions don't change what the ring meant to your grandparents or what it means to our family. Mom was right, but it took time for me to feel connected to the ring again. I put it away for several months while I processed the betrayal and worked through my feelings about trust and relationships. The experience with Jake taught me valuable lessons about recognizing red flags and protecting myself from people who might exploit my trust. Looking back, were there warning signs that you missed? My therapist asked during one of our sessions. Maybe. Jake was always vague about his finances, and he borrowed small amounts of money from me occasionally. But I interpreted that as normal relationship stuff, not as signs that he might steal from me. What would you do differently in future relationships? I'd be more careful about sharing information about valuable possessions. I'd pay attention to how partners handle financial stress. And I'd trust my instincts if something feels wrong instead of letting someone convince me I'm being paranoid. The therapy helped me understand that Jake's betrayal wasn't a reflection of my judgment or worth as a person. He was a skilled manipulator who targeted trusting women and exploited their kindness and love. Predators like Jake are experts at appearing trustworthy, my therapist explained. They study their victims and present themselves as exactly what those victims are looking for in a partner. 6 months after Jake's arrest, I started dating again. I was more cautious than I had been before, but I refused to let his betrayal make me cynical about love and relationships. I met David through a mutual friend, and we took things very slowly. I was upfront about my experience with Jake and my need to build trust gradually. "I appreciate you telling me about your ex," David said when I explained why I was being cautious about our relationship. "That takes courage, and it helps me understand how to be a good partner to you." David was patient with my trust issues and consistent in his honesty about everything from his finances to his feelings about our relationship. "Trust has to be earned," he told me. "I'm willing to take whatever time you need to feel secure with me." A year later, David proposed to me with a ring he had designed himself, incorporating elements that honored my family tradition while creating something entirely new and unique to our relationship. I wanted our engagement ring to represent our love story, not anyone else's, he explained when he proposed. "This ring is ours from the beginning." The proposal was everything. Jake's hadn't been honest, thoughtful, and based on genuine love rather than manipulation and deception. We've been happily married for 2 years now, and I wear both my engagement ring and my grandmother's ring on special occasions. "Your grandmother's ring represents lasting love between your grandparents," David told me when I decided to start wearing it again. "Our rings represent lasting love between us. They're both part of your story, and I'm honored to be included in that story." As for Jake, I heard through mutual friends that he was released from prison after serving his full sentence. He apparently moved to another state and was trying to rebuild his life. I hope he learned from his mistakes and stopped preying on trusting women, but I also hope I never have to find out. The most important thing I learned from the experience is that real love doesn't require deception, theft, or manipulation. Real love is built on honesty, respect, and genuine care for your partner's well-being. Jake tried to build a proposal on lies and stolen property because he didn't understand what love actually requires. David built our relationship on truth and trust because he understood that those are the only foundations that can support lasting love. My grandmother's ring is back where it belongs, representing the kind of enduring love my grandparents shared and the kind of love I now have with David. And I'm grateful every day that Jake's betrayal led me to discover what real love actually looks like.